On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, we hear from DeMeco Ryans. What is he looking for? Protecting and not neglecting CJ Stroud.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation from H-Town all the way to Indy. We are your Texans football analysts and insiders and reporters. I'm John Hickman. That's Brian Big Sarge Badfield holding it down for H-Town up there in Indy at the Combine. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we look at the undertones, but overstood. Things that we may have missed or not talked about from DeMeco Ryans' press conference at the Combine that may have went over some heads or that we really need to dive into. Texans are looking for day one players, so we'll get into that conversation. We open up today's show just looking at protecting CJ Stroud and not neglecting CJ Stroud. I think it's important that the Houston Texans be good stewards of their franchise quarterback, Big Sarge.
John Hickman, greetings and salutations, my brother.
Guys, I wish we could really show y'all how long it took for us to actually get the show on the road. As Sarge is in Indianapolis, at the Combine. Hotels Wi-Fi just ain't the best, right? But we're getting it done for you guys, and we're super excited, Sarge. You know, you had an opportunity to be out there and speak with DeMeco Ryans as every other press member. Before we even get into DeMeco, just how good does it feel to be out there in Indianapolis, at the Combine and being a part of that atmosphere that will ultimately feed into the Houston Texans organization over the next couple of months?
John, it's always nice to be next to the house that CJ Stroud and Nico Collins built. Like it's always it's always fun. Just it's like a second home. I'm like, oh wow, look, this is NRG too, especially every time CJ and Nico play inside of Lucas Oil Stadium. But other than that, John, it's really good to be out here, man. It's really good to run into a couple, some people that I haven't seen in a while. To see the rest of the Locked On family is out here as well. I ran into a couple of people today. Our favorite Peter Bukowski, and but other than that, John, getting a chance to speak with DeMeco on Tuesday and with another opportunity to speak with Nick Caserio on Wednesday. I'm just, excited for it.
Yeah, and I think the Houston Texans should be excited about some of the things that DeMeco Ryans said at the press conference. Let's dive right into it. This is DeMeco Ryans' thoughts about going into this offseason, making sure that they have protection for CJ Stroud.
Yeah, getting better protection for CJ is definitely a main point of emphasis for us, right? We know, when CJ is protected, he has a clean pocket, right? He's a pretty good quarterback. And I constantly show guys clips in our meeting after a game of plays when we protect well and we have a good pocket. I'll show guys explosive, outstanding throws CJ is able to make in the middle of the field, along the sideline. Like he's capable of making any throw on the football field, but it's just a matter of protecting him and giving him that comfort when he's in the pocket. When we do that, we can move the ball, we can make plays. So that is a point of emphasis for us of making sure he is protected better.
That was DeMeco Ryans, guys. Excuse that background noise. Hopefully you can power through it. We're going to continue to talk Texans. Sarge, before I hand it over to you, this is what my thoughts were when I heard that. Number one, it sounds like the priority this offseason, whether it may be by draft or free agency, is to make sure they are not repeat offenders of the crimes they committed last season. And that's failing to put CJ Stroud in the best position possible to succeed. That's number one. And I'm also hearing, when I hear things like protect CJ is definitely a main point of emphasis for us, right? He included what kind of QB that they have when the pocket is clean. I think that's important to note. Also looking at not only is he putting an emphasis, I don't think just on the offensive line and protecting CJ from that standpoint, which is probably above all right now, but also he said things, he can make any throw. We got to make sure that he's comfortable back there. I also think that speaks to playmakers out on the field, allowing the trust within them between CJ Stroud and those playmakers to be there, because at times, when Nico went down against Buffalo at that time, Nico was nearly 40% of the Houston Texans offensive yards. So when he goes down, now he's having to bank on his Stephon Diggs, who just got there. They had great chemistry, and a Tank Dell, who was recovering at the time. Everybody else was not able to help that offense altogether. So I look at that by saying the Houston Texans are absolutely going to do everything that they can to make sure that this quarterback has everything that he needs at his fingertips, so we have no more excuses.
John, when you look at what DeMeco Ryans is saying, he understands exactly he knows exactly what he has in CJ Stroud, especially watching him his rookie year and not having a regular rookie season. I mean, he had a record-breaking rookie season. He knows that in order for them to go, in order for them to take that next level, and in order for them to get to that AFC Championship game and ultimately that Super Bowl, they have to have CJ Stroud, and they have to have him upright. You cannot have a second-year quarterback taking that amount of hits. And I mean, when you're talking about the sacks, I'm not even talking about the sacks. I'm talking about the amount of just hits that he took, and that takes a toll on your body, over time. And it also, we've seen that it made CJ a little bit shell-shocked, going throughout the season, something that we weren't used to seeing him do, having the happy feet, maybe rushing some throws, not feeling comfortable. He didn't really feel comfortable until that offensive line moved Titus Howard to the left tackle, Titus Howard to the left guard, Titus Howard to the left guard, Blake Fisher to the right tackle, and Juice Scruggs to the right guard. And he started to feel a lot more comfortable. John, they have to protect CJ. I'm going to use this analogy real quick. You take your hand, for example. If you break your pinky, you're still able to use your hand. If you break your middle finger, you're still able to use the function of your hand. You break your thumb, John, you're pretty much done. You break your thumb, because your thumb is what makes everything go. That's how you grip. That's how you do pretty much everything. I mean, you can't do things with these four fingers. And so without your thumb, without your thumb, your hand doesn't work. And CJ, for lack of a better term, is the thumb of the Houston Texans. Without him, the rest of the parts are not going to be able to work. So, that's why they have to make sure that they protect him this year. And hopefully Nick Caley and along with Cole Popovich will come up with a game plan to be able to keep CJ upright this season. You're on mute.
My apologies. I would 100% agree. And again, I also want to add this element to the conversation of how important it is for the protection to go beyond the offensive line restructuring that offensive line and maybe bringing in 2 new bodies and better coaching. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond the wide receiver room as well. It goes to the tight end room as well. It goes to the running back room as well. Those guys got to be better in terms of picking up blitzes from the running back perspective, right? When those linebackers are shooting through the middle of the offensive line. So I think what we're going to see, and we'll talk about it to close out today's show, I think what we're really going to see is the Houston Texans attempt to 180 this offense. Yeah. And that's going to be difficult, strapped with cash, right? And so very interested and curious to see how they work through that. But
yeah,
it definitely –
No, I was just going to say, let me say this real quick, John. And, this is the second time within the last, couple of weeks we've gotten a chance to speak with DeMeco. And, that has been his point of emphasis. His point of emphasis is to keep his franchise quarterback upright. And that's one of the things that he emphasized to Nick Caley as well. Because, I mean, it starts to stop with Nick Caley, just like what we talked about with Bobby Slowick on the last 2 seasons. He's the offensive coordinator, so it starts and stops with him. There's no possible way that he wants to see that. So I just want to reiterate, having, talked with DeMeco personally, he has emphasized keeping CJ upright.
Yeah, and that's important. And also not only keeping him upright, but making sure that they have the guys that can get open, that they have the guys who are committed in that tight end room to protect the edge, right? And do their job. And so protecting CJ really does look like, when you look around the NFL, and I'm going to use Jalen Hurts for this example before we move on. Regardless of how we feel about Jalen Hurts as a quarterback, look at the job that Howie Roseman did in Philly, right?
Yeah.
Protecting him from an offensive line standpoint, like he ain't getting hit like that. Protecting him this year on their Super Bowl run. I got Saquon in the backfield. Protecting him by making sure that I got two guys on the outside that can get open and create plays for us downfield. I got a good tight end unit. Protecting him so all of his strengths are maximized and the flaws in the game that every quarterback may have are minimized. And so we won't see a lot of those bad moments from a quarterback perspective. Now, with that being said, Sarge, how important is it for the Houston Texans to get some day one starters? At right guard? Very important, whether it be from the draft or free agency, but we're talking about the draft. How important is it for the Houston Texans to revamp their wide receiver room and get some guys that can come in to be impactful day one? So we'll hear from DeMeco Ryans and his thoughts on day one players and what he's looking for. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Big Sarge, man, holding it down out there in Indy for us. Boots on the ground. Sarge got boots on the ground, whether he's overseas protecting the country or whether he's down over here representing for the Houston Texans. This is what DeMeco Ryans had to say about day one starters and what they're looking for.
Ooh. Players come in all different types and sizes, man. But I think when you look at a guy, you're taking a guy in that first round, you're looking at guys who you're leaning on being, day one starters for you. And, second round on three, you're looking for guys who can possibly upgrade the roster to eventually become starters. But, you want to see a guy and what he's done in college, how many snaps he's played, how effective has he been with the reps that he's been given.
Yeah, John, I specifically asked DeMeco Ryans that question on Tuesday because I needed to know. I was really trying to get a sense of, are they trying to stick around that in the first round, or are they trying to move back? And, if they are trying to stick around, like, what are you looking for? Like, who are you looking for? Maybe, try to get get him to say something about maybe a position as far as, getting a day one starter for the Houston Texans. But, John, I also use that because DeMeco also has an eye for talent. And he has an eye for development talent, which you and I have already discussed. But he has that eye for talent. And so when you go in, because, John, like, there's other roles that have to be filled as well. What they need is somebody that's going to be able to come in and know that, hey, you may not be a day one starter, but you may get reps as a backup. You have to stay ready in order, just in case something happened. I mean, we've watched this team over the last two seasons have to endure a plethora of injuries. And, if you don't have the right backups, if you don't have backups in there that are going to be serviceable, then you're watching your team, struggle and suffer. And so you may be able to find some of these guys in these later rounds who are not going to be day one starters. They're going to be role players who are going to be special. John, I don't think people realize. I mean, just look at John Weeks. He made a career in the NFL by being a long snapper. Some people have made a career by being a returner. Some people have made it by being good on special teams and coming in and relieving, the middle linebacker. You look at a player like Neville Hewitt, who went from being a starter to being one of, to being a really good backup for the Houston Texans. And so, with that pick that they have at 25, I'm just trying to see, are you going to stay and get that day one starter that you're looking for? What position are you looking for? And if the person that you're going to pick at number 25, if you don't move up or move out, are they going to come in and start day one?
And I think the Houston Texans are in such an intriguing position right now because from my outlook and my perspective and how I see things, I think the Houston Texans need a new starting right guard. I think the competition that is across that offensive line, aside from Laremy Tunsil, and I'm even going to say Blake Fisher, I think that there are players that you could make the case for in this draft that just may fit what Nick Caley wants to do and what Cole Popovich may be looking forward to. I also think that what makes Houston so intriguing right now, to your point, bringing in guys that can help with the depth, who's to say the depth isn't already on this team, and maybe they could bring in guys that can help fill the void of what they need from some starting positions. Again, right guard. I think between the guards that they already have on his roster, you can make a case that, hey, it'll be some good competition at camp. But let's say if the Houston Texans feel very highly on Tyler Booker, is he a guy that they really want? And if he's there at 25, do they draft him or not? Right? To me, he's a clear-cut number one pure guard in this draft. A lot of the other guards that I may think can work out for the Houston Texans, they're playing tackle right now coming out of college. So you can make the case that they'll slide in. Same goes with our conversation with DeMeco Ryans, Luther Burden, right? I'm starting to see him fall down some mock drafts. If he's there, how do they view him? Is he a day one starter? And if he's a day one starter, does that push guys like who's already currently on the roster? Remember, only Nico Collins, John Mechie, and Xavier Hutchinson on his roster right now. Does that push other players down? So I think they're in an intriguing position because between the first and second round, with a new OC, what does his offense look like, right? We talked about the speculation of the Patriots background and the Rams background, but are there players that are out there that from a Rams perspective, he was like, man, I would love to have him in LA with us, right? And so they're in a very interesting position right now. And on top of that, what if they were looked to use the 25th pick, maybe trade back a little bit, or if they want to be aggressive enough, depending on how they want to go about free agency, hey, man, we want to trade back up into the second round, or we want to maybe trade and get 2 third-rounders this year because we feel so highly about a guy that may be right there. Houston still got to address their IDL, right? We haven't even talked about that. This has been off. What they can do, I think, is important. I like the fact that from what we know about the guys here, you can either bring some of those guys back who are already on rookie deals, third and second round contract deals, and they'll be competing for a spot, and maybe they'll be a starter, or some of those guys just may be some damn good backups, and the guys that are in front of them are just better, and that will alleviate the thought of, hey, man, if this guy in front of us goes down, the Houston Texans are screwed because you got somebody that's coming back and will be a part of this franchise for another year. So day one starters from DeMeco Ryans, I'm very curious to see how he views a lot of these guys, especially on the offensive side of the ball, seeing that he's a defensive guy. And that's where I really expect Nick Caserio, Nick Caley to, hand in hand, work well with their scouting department to figure out who's the guy on our big board that we just got to get. We cannot miss out on. And who's the second tier guy, third tier guy that if we can move up for him, we will. I'm sorry for talking too long.
No, John, you don't have to apologize, man. This is the Locked On Texans show where the fans, viewers, and listeners love to hear your perspective and what you have to say, especially when it's good. And so that's why I didn't interrupt you, stop, because everything that you were saying was good. And, John, I think that one thing that we're going to learn here in the next couple of weeks leading up to the draft. So the day one starters, the day one starter topic is even interesting because from now to the draft, how much money is General Manager Nick Caserio going to be able to free up to be able to go after those free agents? Because on Tuesday, DeMeco Ryans told us that they have over 20 free agents on that team. Over 20 free agents on that team, and those are spots that are going to have to be filled. Now, if you're going to use if you could free up some money and maybe use some of the draft picks, then guess what? Maybe that free agent that you go out and get becomes your day one starter if you're not going to go through the draft and get it. But when we get an opportunity to talk to Nick Caserio, we're going to get a lot of things cleared up, hopefully. Hopefully we'll get a lot of things cleared up to whereas some of their plan, because he's one of those guys that keeps everything close to the vest, literally with his little sweater vest on. But he's not going to tell us a whole lot, John, but that's where you and I and the fan base are wondering what are you going to do? What moves are going to be made? How are you going to restructure the contracts? Where are you going to find the money to be able to go out and be a huge player? Let me take that back. Not a huge player, but just a player in the free agency market. Because one of the things that DeMeco reiterated on Tuesday was I have been heavily studying the free agent market. I really haven't dove into the draft just yet because I knew that we had this week coming up. I have been talking to my scouts. I have been talking to other people that's going to be in the room, but I've also been keeping a close eye on what free agency could potentially look like.
Yeah, and I also want to add to that, Sarge. I don't know how you feel, but I also feel like this is really one of those lackluster free agent classes, and
Just like the
and
draft.
just like the draft. And so you look at it. Do you spend money in free agency, or do you see those guys in the draft and say, "Hey, man, we can coach him up, and he can be exactly what we're looking forward to." And I will also say on the flip side, like last year had a very great running back class: Joe Mixon,
Yeah.
Saquon, Derrick Henry. I think this year's draft has a great running back class. Um, Last year had a great, wide receiver draft. This year they don't have I don't think a knock your socks off wide receiver draft. So for the Houston Texans, the battle in between, where are we going to prioritize our efforts all together? Do we want to hit free agency hard, or do we want to hit draft hard? And for me, it looks like the draft is where they can win.
Well, John, and I agree with you on that. That's where the dilemma comes in because you say draft these guys because you can get them cheap. You draft these guys, you can get them cheap, have them on the roster, and they could be serviceable. And then you can become a player in 2026 in the free agency market where the market will be a little bit better. You'll have a little bit more money to spend. Then you maybe be able to address the bigger needs. But you're also going to be coming up on having to pay Will Anderson and CJ Stroud as well. So that's where it gets tricky. But you bring them in, and on the flip side of that, how is the fan base going to take that? And I know, hey man, look, the fans are going to be the fans. But John, there's a lot of fans out here. There's a lot of fans out here who knows exactly, how to watch the game, how to listen to press conferences, how to decode things, and they really love their team. And so, can they take another? Hey man, if we get the AFC South title and we get to the AFC Championship game and we lose, just hold on because we're trying to build something and put something together for 2026. I don't think that's going to go over well with the fan base because, John, getting to that next level, like you want to get to that next level. Like it's like you're right there and you're like, I can't get through this door. Why is Kansas City and Baltimore always in my way?
Yeah, man, we got to talk about the undertones. Like you don't want to hear the same old word salad from your general manager, who does a very good job of keeping everything in house. But I do think DeMeco Ryan says some things that we may have overskipped, but we absolutely need to make sure that it's overstood. So we got more Locked On Texans. Basketball season is popping. Games are already tipping off, and the NBA action is really hot right now. There's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. The app is easy to use, easy to navigate, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Ain't no waiting around. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet win. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texas listeners and viewers. Sarge, I don't know about you, man.
Yeah.
I like to kind of read between the lines a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that what the Houston Texans can benefit from, because this is such a great running back draft class, is adding young talent. But just hear this from DeMeco Ryans really quick. It's a little chuckle. Look, I don't know how to put it, but just hear what he has to say.
Would love to have Jahmyr Gibbs in that speed. Can we get a Jahmyr Gibbs? No, he's
defensively. Do you look for a certain type of line?
can we get a Jahmyr Gibbs? Sarge, I
Do
don't
you
know
think
about
that's a
you.
Jahmyr Gibbs in his draft?
Do I think there's a Jahmyr Gibbs in this draft? I can't wait to see some of these 40 times. That
Okay.
matters. But Jahmyr Gibbs, we had this conversation. I think he's one of the better running backs in the NFL. Do I think there's a Jahmyr Gibbs? I'm going to say no.
Mhm.
Do I think there's a change of pace back in this draft that the Houston Texans can benefit from and that can bring relief to a running back in Joe Mixon, who is not 30 yet, but getting up in age? He's taking a lot of hits. He's took a lot of hits last year. Do I think there's a young running back that can come in and also be an extension of the offense that Houston can sustain over the course of time? Right?
Mhm.
I don't know how much of Dameon Pierce in Houston we have left, and I'm not taking
Yeah.
a shot at his character. But if I was to look 3 years down the road with this running back draft class, the starting running back for the Houston Texans could very well be a running back from this draft class. And it could very well be a young, fresh running back from this draft class because Joe Mixon is still Joe Mixon that we're looking up and we're saying to ourselves, hey, man, the Houston Texans are in the AFC Championship, and they just had this young back go off for 1,100 yards or however many carries and catches out the backfield. So
What round?
now that's where it gets tricky. Because this running back draft class is so deep, between round 5 and 6. And again, if the Houston Texans feel strongly enough about a player that they feel, hey, we get this guy, there's a different dynamic that he can bring. I'm on the fence of saying, hey, Houston needs to draft 2 receivers. But if it's a receiver early and a running back midway through the draft because they believe that he's such a dynamic player, look what Jahmyr Gibbs was able to do with the Detroit Lions, then I'm all for it. We are expecting Nick Caley to be one of those guys.
Well, John, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know that you've been doing a bunch of research on offensive linemen and defensive linemen, and I don't know if you've had a chance to just dive into the running back class like you normally do. Is there a running back you're thinking about, or is that something that we could table until next week?
No, there are some running backs that I like in this draft class, and I would say my favorite running back, from this draft class, it isn't Genty.
It isn't?
I think
Is it the guy from Arizona State?
No, it's just the kid from Iowa. I really think, let me pull my notes up really quick. I really think Caleb Johnson is the best running back in this year's draft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Look, can we table that until next
We can
week?
absolutely bring it back.
I just needed a name because now I'm like, I want to look because it's interesting what you're saying.
No, we can bring it back. And I'm also say this. Ollie Gordon has filled down a lot of people's mock drafts. I think he would be a perfect guy to come in and say, listen, you ain't got to start right now, but you got talent. You rushed for almost 2,000 yards a year in college. You got talent. You'll be able to play behind Joe Mixon. Also like Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. Now, Sarge, I want to hear what you got to say about this clip right here.
Well, hold on, John, before you play the clip, real quick. Hold on, real quick. You don't think that they have that type of running back on their roster right now?
If I would compare a running back to any of the guys that I just said to the guys that they have here, it may be Jawar Jordan and Taj Brooks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Last one, O-line coach and coordinator. Is there any chance you look for different traits or different play features from your offensive line this year when you're scouting?
No, when I look at offensive linemen, first and foremost, I'm looking at, pass protection. Like, how good is the guy in pass protection? And then, for everyone, for me speaking, offensive lineman, I want to see that grit. I want to see that toughness, right, that nastiness of how guys are finishing their block.
I like that, John. I like that. And listen, something that you and I talk about on a consistent basis, especially offline, is DeMeco is saying, hey, I need my offensive lineman to start playing like my defensive lineman.
100%.
This offseason, y'all may all need to take a retreat together. Y'all all need to get together, have a meeting of the mind. Go to Cabo. get you a villa or something. Just chill out, just hang out, and find out what makes each other tick. One of the things that one thing that I noticed this past season is when they went to Ohio. They stayed there those 3 games after the Hall of Fame game before they played their first preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. John, they got really, really close with each other. I think that they just need another trip together. And I'm just talking about this time, just the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman, because you have some offensive, John, you do have some dogs on that offensive line. They just show it differently than they do on the defensive line. I mean, no, you're not. I can't think of anybody that is as rambunctious as Will Anderson Jr. is on that offensive line. But for just as effective as Will Anderson is on the defensive side of the ball, Laramie Tunsil is that. But he doesn't say anything. He doesn't talk a lot of trash. He just goes about his business. Will doesn't talk a lot of trash, but you know that Will is on the field. Will's presence, you get they don't have a Tim Settle Jr. on that the offensive line. It's going to talk trash. They don't have that, but they do have someone in Titus Howard who will go out there and give his all, whether he's playing in a tackle position or a guard position. And I mean, I found out this past season, Titus has even played center before. And what Jared Patterson told me was when Titus moved to left guard, the way that Patterson was able to get better is because Titus was helping him from a center's position. Because Titus played center before, and Titus has played quarterback.
He was a quarterback in high school, wasn't he?
He's a quarterback. He played tight end, and so he understands a lot. Now, sometimes, you're going to physically get beat. So, anyway, as I digress, DeMeco is basically saying, I need my offensive lineman to have that same mentality that my defensive line had. Now, John, real quickly about these undertones but overstood. So, in the immortal words of the great Negro poet, Young Jeezy, he always says, what's understood don't need to be said, right? DeMeco Ryans has said the last 2 times he's spoken publicly that when he's talking about the offensive line, there only needs to be one voice in the room. There only needs to be one voice in the room. These guys only need to hear from one voice in the room, which tells you something that you and I discussed right here on the Locked On Texans podcast when I said, hey, Chris Strausser was talking, but Cole Popovich was also talking, and it left those guys sometimes confused, especially the younger guys, because what Cole was trying to tell them was the right thing to do, and what Chris Strausser was telling them was, I control your playing time. So, it's a balance. And I'm not here, and John, let me make this real quick. Let me make this clear to the listeners and the viewers. I'm not taking a dump on Chris Strausser. I'm not saying Chris Strausser was not good. I'm just telling you it got to the point where the two started to butt heads, John. The two started to butt heads, and at the end of the day, only one was going to win because, one on one is only one that Cole Popovich ever coached with the Patriots. Not Cole Popovich, Chris Strausser. Chris Strausser ever coached with the Patriots?
No, and you don't want to say it. I'll say it. Chris Strausser just wasn't good at his job last year. I'll just come out and say it. And also an overtone that needs to be overstood really quick. Undertone that needs to be overstood. I 100% believe DeMeco Ryans was not impressed by that room last year. And I think that, like you mentioned, he wants that room to come along with the rest of the rooms on that team. Y'all need to resemble what we're doing here for the Houston Texans. So I 1,000% agree with you. Be more like the D-line. And the one guy that gives me hope, Blake Fisher. The saying things, I want to see grit. I want to see that toughness and nastiness. To me, that just screams, I'm going to get Tyler Booker with the number 25 overall pick.
Wait, John, hold on, time. 2 things. One, yes, I agree with you, and that's because DeMeco Ryans is a defensive guy, so he knows what it's like, playing the game at a high level, to be on that field, to go out there and get a stop, and then you come back and then You got to get right back up and go back on the field because the offense is either turned the ball over or had a 3 and out. You know, the offense is being inefficient. So yes, 2, I do agree with you because I don't know if you remember this or not, John. Let me take you back down memory lane. Blake Fisher's initial press conference with us, I asked him, "Hey man, so you know, are you interested in getting to know about Houston? You know, you interested in finding out the good places to go eat? Man, we got some good restaurants here." He said, "Only thing I'm worried about is playing on Sundays right here at NRG Stadium." I said, "You know what? What's understood don't need to be said."
You got to know it. Blake Fisher come from Notre Dame, man. That's all they did out there. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me at John_Hickman12.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end. You know why I'm looking at you like this.
I don't know.
We'll talk about it later.
We got more Texans this week. Nick Casario's up next. You don't want to miss it. Peace.